I
Yeah, thanks
appreciate the
again.
disclaimer.
Yeah, I'm trying to make that clear before I start. I don't want to sneak a recording and then, get in trouble.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember when I lived in New York, it was you didn't have to get that clearance because there was something about the state law in New York that didn't require it. But then when I was in LA, I was like, oh no, no, you don't have to ask for it, but you need to notify them. So just
hmm
say, I'm recording this. Cool, cool.
Yeah, same thing with same thing on phone calls too. I'm always just trying to be like, yeah, are you cool with this? Should I even get this that you're saying yes on recording?
Right.
While I'm asking about it. Regardless, I really appreciate it. I know it's been crazy. I didn't think a year ago that I'd be, for one, getting to do this. I'm a huge fan of your work, just
Oh,
as
thank you.
another writer of color, and just from what you've been able to cover from the same nerdosphere that I'm really obsessed with. It's been great to see and great to follow. But if you told me last year I'd be getting to interview you now during a pandemic online, I don't think I would have listened to whoever told me that. But
Yeah,
we're here, and
we
so
we are here. It's
my
like, what's a
question,
Zoom? You want a Zoom? I don't know what you're
yeah,
talking about.
I don't even think Zoom was ready for Zoom, and then
No,
now
clearly.
here it is. But how's your 2020 been? How's it been for you and yours being able to just cope, deal, what have you?
I mean, uh it's been fine with the standard disclaimers that apply to that fine. Like I'm blessed and lucky in that my work wasn't impacted in any real way because of the quarantine and the epidemic and the pandemic and whatever demic we're calling it. um, I still get to do my job. I still get to go to work. I still get to get paid. I still get to put food on the table, and all of that's been, a wonderful stress reliever. Um, but I remember we'd been talking about it on the podcast, and I'd been talking about it, sort of in public, the fact that, like the first 6 months of the pandemic were incredibly creatively frustrating for me, in that, I couldn't find a way to work on anything new.
Right.
Lots of what I was doing was, giving notes on this old thing and revising that old thing and doing this bit of work that's, an assignment. But you know I think when you find yourself with some sort of tectonic shift to your amount of free time, it's like, oh man, now it's when I'll write all that stuff I wanted to write. It's like, I broke my leg, now I'll get to it. Like, I'm in the hospital now, I'll read all these books. I'll start writing the great American novel. Like, there were ambitions in March that did not even begin to come to fruition for a good 6 months. And it was only about halfway through it that I realized that we are all undergoing a constant state of trauma, and that trauma is always shifting and moving and metastasizing under our feet. And so the feeling of being able to heal from that trauma and push through it and begin to callus, and get that and be able to do the work wasn't happening because it was always changing. And so, it's so hard to dodge a moving target, let alone, fortify against something that refused fortification. And I had to be gentler with myself. I think I had to be kinder with myself, because I beat myself up about it for a little bit, and then realized, oh, okay, it's not just one thing. One awful thing that happens, it happens, and it leaves a crater in your life, and you figure out how to move on. But this just keeps happening. Um, so it was a good 6 months before I was able to actually break ground on anything new, and it was a relief when it came, to be sure. But it's been a fundamentally weird spring, summer, fall.
I think it's really telling that our best writers couldn't compete with the writers room of 2020, because they've been on the ball. I want to say from
Oh,
January to right now. Whoever they are, really, I'm getting like midi-chlorian vibes, like a
yeah,
midi-chlorian
no,
writing
and
room.
and I feel bad for them in a way, because I'm sure there's stuff that they thought was going to be like, oh man, just wait. We're going to tell them UFOs are real. It's going to blow their minds. And then, like, just nobody cared. And it's like, that was our big gun. All right, fine. But murder hornets, whatever. Wildfires, earthquakes, maybe. We got this pandemic story, and that's the one that's working.
All
Everything
right.
else just doesn't compare.
And they've got the rest of the year to really show us. They're like, all right, we've had some bumps down the road, but we've got something special cooked up. And I'm just hoping it pans out into something, I don't know.
Yeah, the election feels like it's the sweeps week event. We're just like, all right, you guys, it's our big November thingy dingy before the holidays. Just you wait to see what happens. Cliffhanger. Like, oh,
I remember in the
guys.
past it was right before election something big would happen, right? But it's been like quite, that's like a pattern throughout the year. Something big happened every month.
Oh.
So is there something bigger that's supposed to happen? I know every other week there's an asteroid, or maybe the same asteroid, and it's like changing course. I don't know. Um, but we'll see. I'm getting a lot of War of the World vibes, or no, Day the Earth Stood Still kind of thing. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Um, the Plague Nerdalogs, how's that been going? I know it's been a long time since its inception. It feels like
Mhm.
longer, but how's it going? What's the traction like now, considering all the new things that have arrived?
I mean, it feels like it was 1,000 years ago, because the iteration of this year has been so fast. But when we launched it, God, I think that was May, April,
Mm-hmm.
May. Yeah,
It
something
was
like
around
that.
May. Yeah.
It was, let's raise some money for kids who are living in food deserts and are having trouble getting, having ends met, and parents are unemployed and unable to rely on the schools as they might used to do for free meals. Let's forget a way to do a good thing. It was great. A bunch of people came out and they contributed their time and their talent. And we raised like 16 grand for No Kid Hungry, which was like, oh, this is insane, bananas, this is fantastic, couldn't ask for anything more. And then George Floyd was murdered, and the world shifted again, and then it became about that. And then thinking about, again, what can I do, this schmuck of a writer living in LA, who's still getting to work, and what can I do that would make an impact in a tangible way. And I'm not necessarily a protester, and given that I've got a family and I've got a kid who's got special needs, being out with tens of thousands of people was not really in the cards.
Right.
But I definitely wanted to do something. So it was, all right, well, let's just shift the focus to the Nerdalogs and make it about this. And in short order, we raised like 50 grand for Black Lives Matter, which was just as astonishing, if not more, than the first chunk of money we raised. Not only because we did it faster, but because people who were, if not on the fence, were just swamped, made the time that they couldn't make before. And so the level of talent, the first wave was phenomenal, but the second wave was equally so, and even more robust. And once we raised $50,000, it became clear. It's like, all right, listen, I don't know, you know I don't think we're going to do a third wave of this, because we've called everybody we knew. Everybody who was going to do it did it. We raised so much money, far beyond my wildest dreams. Like, I was like, if we can raise 10 grand, that's amazing. And to be able to, in 2 months, offer 66 grand to charity. The idea was always to make it free, and always to make it a thing that anybody could look at. And so once we hit that number, we're like, you know what? We feel like it's done its job. And so that was July, end of July, I think, maybe beginning of August. We flipped the switch and just dropped, the paywall, and made it so that it was free for the world. And it feels so long ago, that I had to remind myself the other day. I was like, oh, that was this year. That just wasn't
Yep.
this year. That was like
Yep.
2 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of forgot, and then felt this overwhelming desire to thank everybody again. So thank you so much for having done that. Like, I just took a look at all of these again, and it remains phenomenal. And it's maybe the single thing I'm most proud of the last 8 or 9 months, is just knowing people who would donate their time for such a thing, and then finding a way to pivot our passion into progress. um, felt it felt worthwhile, in a way that not very much has felt this year.
Yeah, and it was really reaffirming too, because you wonder what can you do, and
Mm,
you've got varying stakes depending on who's talking, right? You're speaking about yourself and where you come from, and I was feeling quite similar. I'm 2 years married. I don't have a child, but I felt the same, that there's a lot at stake. I live with my father, but to be around
mm.
that many people, he's got diabetes. There are so many stakes involved, but what can you do? And to see that was really, it was reaffirming, and it felt great. And then also thinking about the reach of something like Zoom, like quite literally,
Mm,
we could see the space of some of these fantastic actors and actresses, and we're like, oh my
mm.
gosh, that's their bedroom, or this is where they live. Usually it's a studio, right? It's a space that you don't get to see intimately, but to have that intimacy involved with such a phenomenal project, I think was really beautiful, given the time that these goings on were happening.
Yeah, and I have always been impressed with the work that actors do, primarily because it's a thing that I can't do, and so I'm always like, wow, how did you pull that off? And then I tried to do a monologue, and I'm like, this is hard, you guys. Like, how do you memorize this quickly, and how do you find nuances and intonations that weren't in the original text, and how do and it was just this magic trick that they could all do. And at the minute I tried to do it, it barely held together as a trick that might delight a 4-year-old. There's a quarter behind your ear, and meanwhile they made the Brooklyn Bridge disappear, on the regular. it
Yeah,
uh
yeah.
it was illuminating in that way. Like, I was talking to Trisha Helfer, who I co-host the Battlestar Galacticast with, and who performed one of them. I was just like, Trisha, I'm so impressed, and I probably shouldn't be, but it's the kind of impression that you only get from having to try to do a thing and fail, and then watch people just skate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know about you, but I absolutely can act at home when I'm alone and
Oh,
nobody's
sure.
watching. Yeah,
Oh,
right.
yeah, I
And
get
and
I
an audience of one, absolutely, I knock it out of the park every time. But
Yeah, I act like I sing in the shower, man. I'm Laurence Olivier if nobody's watching.
um, I wanted to talk about the Snyder Cut. I wanted to know what your thoughts were. It's been so strange seeing the tweets online. I'd watch
Hmm.
it. I hadn't been a fan of the original, and slowly but surely I was feeling convinced that I might appreciate the cut. But it's been so weird. It's turned into almost like console wars for video games, where if you like Marvel and DC does a thing, or if DC does a thing and you don't like Marvel, it's been oddly hostile. I thought it would have been a thing that people can come together and be like, whoa, this looks pretty dope. But that doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah, I mean,
Very
it doesn't seem to be the case, and I think some of it, ironically, it is less to do, at least for me, with whatever Zach himself is doing. Which it is less a cut of a movie. Like, Snyder Cut implies that, oh yeah, no, they made me take some stuff out, so I'm reinserting it. That is how we have until this point always understood a director's cut to be, which was, I shot a bunch of stuff and it was too long and it tested poorly and the studio made me take all the stuff out, so I'm putting back in the stuff that I loved, and
mm-hmm.
so it's my full vision. And it's less that and more, I left a movie too early. Another guy came on and finished it, and it's not the movie that I would have made. So they're giving me tens of millions of dollars to just make the movie. Like, it's less a cut and more I had an outline before, and
Mm-hmm.
I shot like 3 weeks worth of stuff. I'm making a new thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like that in and of itself is an aberration, to be certain, but I don't have any value judgment over it. To a certain degree, it's like, hey, Zach, if you managed to convince Warner Brothers to give you $70 million to make this movie, power to you, man. That's a good con,
Oh yeah.
and I'm glad it's paying off for you. But it's the idea that Justice League as a film, whatever one might have thought of it, is some like maligned masterpiece that needs, like, the Sistine Chapel, who's been just smoked and muddied over years, somehow needs to be restored and brought back to its full glory. Like, I don't know if that's the project for which you can say that. Like, it's okay. the audience kind of spoke, and the box office spoke, and it's at best fine. you know the weird polarizing nature of Justice League has more to do, I think, with the fans of Justice League than it does with the film itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's a level of vitriol and acidity and antipathy from segments of that fan base that made me loath to see them get anything they wanted.
I think
Like,
that is so perfectly put. Really, really.
it's like, you've been a bad boy, you don't get any treats. Like, you shouldn't, if you've been a shitty kid for a whole year, then you shouldn't get any toys come Christmas or Hanukkah. Like, that's when you get the lump of coal in your stocking. And now
Or
we're
somebody else
giving.
eats your candy, or somebody else opens those gifts, right? The folks that
Yeah,
haven't been doing anything wrong, at least.
totally.
But you bring up
Now
a
this
great point.
kid.
It really changes. What does it mean to be a cut? Because it is quite literally something different. And to call it that, a cut would imply that we're working with something similar. But yeah, given the ridiculous, like the just awful circumstances that things had changed for Snyder at the time, I'm sure it's going to be something different. What's it pushing? Like 3 hours, 4 hours or
It'll be
something?
4 hours. It'll be 4 hours of at this point, television. So it's a 4-part miniseries, an hour each. And they're also calling it like Zack Snyder's Justice League and not like the Snyder Cut, to absolve any potentially fraudulent, uh, dialogue or language. But hey, I'll watch it because I watch these things and I'm curious to see what happens when a person gets to go back and revisit their art, and make it the way they wanted it to be. Um, but it's such a bonkers experiment that feels like a victory for some. Um, Especially like there's all those footage and still images of like Zack Snyder's got film reels, and that's the Snyder Cut. It's like, man, there's nothing in there. Like, you didn't shoot this movie. Like, it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what's in these reels. Like, maybe they're animatics, but those wouldn't be made to print. Like, what's happening here?
It reminds me of the photo ops where the Trump administration had like empty folders,
Yeah.
blank notepads. Not that there's any similarity at all, but good lord. And it does make me think about Suicide Squad, right? So we've got these films that come out initially, and then there's a reimagining again with somebody else, and so you're like, is this going to turn into a pattern where the first installment comes out and folks don't like it, but then somebody else comes in and they're like, you know what, that's not what we meant. Uh,
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that given that we live in the IP arms race of Hollywood, um, nothing will get to lay fallow for too long. So it's like, hey, Suicide Squad came out. You know, Critics kind of hated it. The audiences didn't really respond to it. It still somehow made like $600 million around the world. So clearly, there's an interest for the characters, if not for this particular version of this story of the characters. So, well, we're not going to not make another one. We might not go back to that same creative well and let those same people take another swing at it, but oh, no, we're doing this again. Like, if for no other reason than Harley Quinn is important enough to us as a character that
mhm,
she's never going to be off screen for too long.
mhm.
Um, but and it's this, like, there's always going to be a Godzilla movie. Every 5 years, at this point, you're going to get a Godzilla movie. There's always going to be a Marvel movie. There's some things that at this point seem inevitable, until they aren't. And I don't quite know what the set of circumstances you would need for there not to be superhero movies, but there also always used to be westerns, and now there aren't. And at some point everything falls out of vogue. So, like,
If there's any indication, I think what we're going to see now is always going to be a pandemic movie.
yeah.
Like
Songbird, man, I saw that trailer. It's my friend Francesco Francavilla, a comics illustrator, put up this tweet that was like, man, Joe Biden's ad team is really good
oh, I saw.
presenting. Here's the future. Here's Donald Trump's America of tomorrow. But it's like, man, like, read the room. Like, nobody wants a movie where you're saying that we're going to be in this for 4 years and it's going to get worse and everybody's getting shot on the streets. It's like, let's get some space.
If anything, could you take us off of this planet? I mean, there is so much going on elsewhere that you could make up remove us from here and give us a non-pandemic going on elsewhere. Can we fight somewhere else at least?
Yeah, or like I understand the desire to play on the themes of the moment, but find a way to bury those themes in something else that's not just the moment. It's like you see I mean, one of my favorite movies of a good long while ago is I think it's Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Hmm.
It's the second in the Caesar trilogy, which I think is an amazing film. You know,
Absolutely.
and it's 100%, and even War of the Planet of the Apes is 100% like a slave riot movie. And I was like, but it's also not a slavery movie because I don't need to see any more of those. But the themes are the same. And so, like, do that. If you want to do a movie about isolation and a movie about, sort of connection, there's a dozen ways to do that that don't involve literally like the CDC showing up at your door and killing people. I don't want that.
Right, and it seems like on the nose too easy. You just take what's happening and you add a few like construction signs that have curfews and jets flying overhead and the stakes. But I think you're
Mm-hmm.
right, that just give us something different without the thing being like in your face the whole time. And Planet of the Apes series was incredible. I really thought it was phenomenal, and it was revolutionary without it being revolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think they stuck the landing perfectly for that one at
Yeah.
least.
I
Um,
mean, that's the gift that speculative fiction does for you, right? Like science fiction lets you tell stories about today in the sort of the veil of something other. And it lets you connect with something without being confronted by it at the same time. And it feels like maybe the people who made this movie didn't quite ingest that lesson as well as they might have.
no,
Maybe
not at
repeated
all.
on them once or twice.
Not at all. If anything, Blade Runner 2049 showed me that I will be obsessed with like the beautiful desert that will be Los Angeles in the future.
Yeah, it's just like, man, give me some distance,
Yeah,
and I don't
yeah,
have any.
yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
they started making the movie and they thought we'd be done by now, and they thought like, oh, well, clearly we'll be out of this in like 2 or 3 months, so we
Hmm.
got this right. Oh no,
And it would be
no,
something to laugh about, right? Because it would have been so long and it would have been contained like that. But it's October. Sorry, November, in
right,
another day or two. Um,
yeah,
real quick before I let you go, I have access to a special token that allows you, it's free of charge, to
oh, thank you.
recast any film you would like.
Mm.
But it's only one film. Sky's the limit. Budget, what have you. Anybody is available. What is that film? And it doesn't necessarily have to have been one that was bad, right? Just any film.
Yeah, no, okay, so I can recast anything. um in the totality of cinema, big question. um I I
We could keep it
my
to superhero movies if it's easier to.
n- no, ironically it isn't, because like at this point it is less a matter of a film being miscast, a superhero movie, and more of a didn't need that movie to exist at all. Like I don't know who you put in Venom that makes it like I mean, Tom Hardy's doing 120% worth of that work. I'm like, but this movie's batshit crazy. I don't understand it at all. But okay. I kind of my brain is going to some like crazy awesome black exploitation Ocean's 8, where you get like Pam Grier and like
Oh,
Diane Cannon and Diana Ross, like these great, the great black actresses staging an amazing heist of something cool.
mm-hmm.
I need less Sandra Bullocks and Kate Blanchetts, and I need more, you know, Jada Pinkett Smiths and Queen Latifah's
Oh, please,
and
yes,
Megan Goods and
yes.
Garcelle Beauvais. Just give me all that chocolate thunder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, smash and grab heist movie. Because yeah, like I remember having a conversation with somebody, not quite early on when we were doing Fat Man at the Scum and Villainy Cantina, and somebody was like, I find it difficult to write female characters, and I find it difficult, and whether or not I should be allowed to write characters outside my ethnicity. I was like, dude, I understand that, and it's good that you feel that way. The solution is not to not write them. The solution is to do the work that would allow you to write them, which is to just understand the realities that the life of a white dude is far different from the life of a black woman, but they want the same things. Like, human desires are human desires, and wants and
Mm-hmm.
needs are somewhat universal. What is different is the obstacles to getting those things. Um, and so the obstacles for a white dude to get a mortgage are different from the obstacles of an Asian lady to get a mortgage. Um, and you need to understand what those obstacles are to be able to write that character, and then
Mm-hmm.
what that person is then forced to do to get the thing that she wants. So what forces, 8 stunning black women to stage a heist? What is it they're trying to achieve? What is it they want? And what are the obstacles of them just literally getting the things you would need to do it? I think that suddenly becomes a completely different movie and a slightly more interesting movie, but a no less fun movie.
Right.
Um, and you just need to play fair with those individual human realities, and then find ways to turn that stuff into drama, and then that's the trick.
And I think once you get to the heart of that, the human desires being universal, then you're just like, okay, I could, this could work because the people in this movie are human, even if they were inhuman.
Yeah,
I think it still
totally.
work, right?
Even if you're aliens, like, what does this thing want? What is it willing to do to get it, and what's in its way?
Mm-hmm.
And that is at its core the essential requirements for drama. um, you just need to be able to do the work to find your way into those people's heads, and then make that interesting. But everybody wants something.
Absolutely. Besides that Ocean 8, what can fans like myself look forward to? Any work you've got coming up to 2021, if we're still here, just as a
If we're still here, I think 2021 will definitely bring Masters of the Universe Revelation, which animated series I wrote an episode of for Kevin Smith. So I think that'll come out on Netflix. I think Critical Role. I wrote an episode of The Legend of Vox Machina for those folks. So like the animation stuff that I did in 2019 will come to fruition in 2021.
Mhm.
Um, there's some comic book stuff I think that will be out. Definitely Adora and the Distance will be out, hopefully by Christmas of this year. And then another book that I'm doing with Comixology that hasn't been announced yet, hopefully will be out in 2021. Um, what else is happening? I mean, Picard, there's, I don't know when production will start, which means I don't know when episodes will air. Hopefully 2021 would be nice.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but yeah, and then there's always irons in the fire, a thing that I keep having to remind my mom. Like, no, that this is the way this business works. You have 80,000 irons in the fire, and 2 of them will actually spark a flame. But it's necessary to have all those embers burning. So hopefully 1 or 2 more embers will spark that might hit something in 2021.
I have no doubt about that, and it's a really sobering image to keep in mind that if it's okay with you, I'd like to borrow, and I'm gonna
Mhm.
think about too, and I'm thinking about the stuff that I'd like to work on. Because yeah, my folks talk about the same thing, ask me the same thing, and my dad's like, "You got to get involved in politics. You got to get involved in politics." And I'm like, "Pops, I'm not a politician. I'm a writer. This is what I do. I'm working on a bunch of different stuff. I promise. I'll change the world with it,
Right.
or at least I'll try." Um,
Yeah.
I
I mean,
really,
at the
really,
very least, it's one of those, like, can you change the world? Maybe. If you can lighten one person's burden, then that in and of itself is doing a little bit of work. Um, so it's all worthwhile. It's all necessary. Um, you know, but is it setting policy? Maybe not. But it might be, giving somebody else an idea of what it's like to be somebody else, or giving somebody the license to dream a different dream. And I think that's just as valuable.
well, the work you've been able to put out has made 2020 more palatable for me. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you just getting to sit down and chop it up with me. And I hope we get to talk more about the stuff you're working and cooking up in the future.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to, man. This was fun.
This was